Welcome to this MOL 200 lecture, which will be on amino acid oxidation and the production of urea, as well as nitrogen metabolism and the biosynthesis of amino acids and nucleotides. The lecture will be served in several parts. Part 1 will focus on protein digestion into amino acids. Now, amino acids are building blocks of biomolecules, but are also used as fuel for metabolic energy. If there are excessive amino acids from protein synthesis or protein degradation, or if the diet is rich in amino acids, then you will use it also as energy. Plants normally do not oxidize amino acids for energy. In contrast to plants, animals cannot store amino acids, but during starvation, cellular proteins may be used as fuel. Carnivores might get up to 90% of their energy from amino acid oxidation. Now, one example of a carnivore with a rather special metabolism is Trogdor the Burninator, shown here in all his majesty. He subsists on the diet of medieval peasants. Please note the beefy arm, fiery breath, and overall shininess. As we will see towards the end of part 1, this may be a consequence of a high protein diet. But first, we need to lay down some basics. Plants rarely oxidize amino acids for fuel. However, plants, especially legumes, can store proteins in their seeds. Therefore, many seeds and also nuts are good dietary sources of proteins. Humans, in contrast, has a total body protein weight of about 11 kilos, but this does not represent storage. These are functional proteins. But 25% of this is collagen in your bones and cartilage and tendons. Collagen is metabolically quite inert. So the average daily protein turnover, that is proteins that are built up and broken down, represent about 250 grams per day. As we will see, there is a pool of amino acids that can be drained and filled by different processes. But this pool is very dynamic and does not represent long-term storage. Human proteins have very different lifetimes. A typical muscle protein, for instance, might survive for 3 weeks, but many liver enzymes turn over in a couple of days. Some regulatory enzymes have half-lives measured in hours or even minutes. Proteins are degraded into G-peptides, D-peptides, and amino acids. These are taken up into the small intestine, and its second last half of this organ. They are absorbed by the intestinal wall and transported to the blood using diffusion and active ATP-dependent transport mechanisms. The amino acids are incorporated from blood to the liver in the portal vein depicted here. The majority of the amino acids released during protein degradation are promptly reincorporated into new proteins. So the net protein synthesis accounts for less than 1/3 of the dietary amino acid intake, even in rapidly growing children consuming a minimal diet. So there is no net or great net buildup of protein from day to day. Most of the ingested protein is ultimately oxidized to provide energy, and the surplus nitrogen is then excreted a little bit as ammonia, which is toxic, so it has to be kept to a tolerable level, but mostly as urea in urine. So urea is a compound that contains 2 nitrogen atoms, and it's highly soluble in water, so urea is very well suited to this purpose. After you chew and swallow your food, proteins from the diet are broken down to short peptides and free amino acids, mainly by proteases. Now we'll have 3 slides that each detail this process, from the food gets into your stomach, to free amino acids that are taken up in a pool that the organism then can work with in different ways. These slides correspond roughly to the parts of your organs that are highlighted in different colors. Cells in the stomach lining, red shade, and bullet point A. The exocrine cells of the pancreas, blue shade and bullet point B, and the villi, or better known as tarmtopper, green shade, and bullet point C are the main players in each slide. Let's have a look. Digestion starts even before you take the first bite, and saliva production can be initiated by cues such as odor and sight. As you chew, protein digestion starts in the form of mechanical mixing. The saliva helps lubricate as well as swallowing, as swallowing brings the food to the stomach. Here, further mechanical as well as enzymatic digestion take place. Stomach contractions called peristaltic moments mix stomach contents into a semi-fluid substance called chyme. The gastric G cells senses the presence of protein in the chyme, and then they start to secrete a substance called gastrin. Then parietal cells secretes hydrochloric acid, bringing the pH down to about 1 or 2 pH units. This has the effect of disinfecting the chyme and, importantly, denaturing the proteins. It also places the proteins in a hydrolytic condition, making it easy for the protein to be reduced to short peptides and amino acids. In turn, this stimulates secretion of pepsinogen from the chief cells here. Pepsinogen is activated and converted to pepsin, triggered by the acid secretion and resulting low pH. Now the final step. This protease digests the denatured proteins from their end terminal towards the first hydrophobic or bulky aromatic residues. The cleavage generally takes place near these hydrophobic residues at the P1 position, which is directly in front of the cleavage site, and the P1 prime position, which is directly after the cleavage site. So the residues indicated here, they generally are associated with a high probability of cleavage, but pepsin has a very broad specificity, or it's not that specific, so cleavage can really happen in many places, especially if digestion goes on for a long time. And protein digestion does go on for a long time, and quite much longer than carbohydrate digestion. But compared to fat digestion, it's faster. So between carbohydrates and fats, proteins takes an intermediate amount of time to digest. But it could help you retain a feeling of fullness, and as such, it might be viewed as having positive effects on the diet. The main player of this slide are the exocrine cells of the pancreas, shown here. These are the exocrine cells, and this is the pancreas. The chyme, containing partially digested protein and free amino acids, now enter the duodenum. That is the first part of the small intestine. This acidic soup stimulates the production and secretion of secretin, which in turn stimulates release of bicarbonate, bringing the pH up towards neutrality. Further down the intestine, the pH is close to neutral in terms of acidity. So there are some free amino acids in the chyme, and these free amino acids stimulate the release of cholecystokinin, which is a peptide hormone that is secreted from the duodenum lining, and which stimulates the release of pancreatic enzymes. These are then led down here and released into the small intestine. These proteins are trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase A and B, and they need to be activated as they enter the small intestine, and this is done by enteropeptidases that are released from the intestinal cells. By now, after these proteins have done their work, almost all protein is digested to short peptides or free amino acids. And then aminopeptidases and dipeptidases convert the remaining short peptides to free amino acids. We assume that the intestinal fluid by now practically contains no undigested protein, only free amino acids. These amino acids are taken up by the villi, or tarmtotter, which is a much cuter term for this. Notice how the intestinal features present a very high surface area, which is also covered in intestinal mucosa towards the intestinal fluid, and this makes the uptake of amino acids and other substances very effective. The amino acids are handled both by diffusion and mechanisms and active ATP-dependent mechanisms. So they enter the bloodstream through this absorption and are transported to the liver, where they are taken up by the portal way. This transport route is different than the results of lipid hydrolysis, which, as you may recall, enters the lymphatic system instead of the blood system. Now, what happens if undigested protein enters this part of the small intestine and continues on? This can happen if you consume very large amounts of protein and in this way overload your system. Or it can happen if protein that you consume is encapsulated into something that is hard for you to digest, as would be the case for some plant food where protein is protected by cellulose husks. In any case, the result of this, protein passing to the part of the intestine, or passing this part of the intestine and continuing on, is excessive gas production as microbes feast on what you have not been able to break down. This process also ensures that the gases produced are particularly stinky. The amino acids enter the liver and are processed in many different ways. This slide we will not go into. Just look at the very rough outline of different processes and focus on the different ways that amino acids can have. As mentioned initially, there is a pool of amino acids available for the organism. This can be replenished primarily from body proteins, through proteolysis, and from the diet, as we have just described. This pool does not represent much storage. It's just a dynamic and distributed pool with rapid turnover. And from this pool, amino acids can enter body protein through protein synthesis. It can also be used in the biosynthesis of other nitrogen compounds, such as nucleotides, purines, creatine, and other compounds. And finally, it can go through catabolism, be broken down and end up as urea and smaller amounts of ammonia. Urea is highly soluble and contains 2 nitrogen atoms. So this is a very efficient way to pass nitrogen out of the body, solubilized in urine. The smaller amount of ammonia has to be kept under control because ammonia is quite toxic. This slide is related to the previous slide, but is a bit more detailed and refers also to the 3 important metabolic cycles: the urea cycle, the aspartate arginine succinate shunt of the citric acid cycle, and the citric acid cycle. One notable feature of this schematic is that from amino acids, ammonium can be extracted. Then the ammonium can be used in biosynthesis of nitrogen compounds. The remaining carbon skeletons can enter the citric acid cycle to contribute to ATP and glucose production. Finally, note that the 3 cycles are connected by the middle shunt cycle. Now, this part is nearly over. All we need to do is try to sum it up. And we have to revisit Trogdor the Burninator, of course. Here he is again in all his majesty, shiny, strong-armed, with a fiery breath. Okay, let's sum up. Protein is digested in a multi-step fashion. Key steps are mechanical treatment, like chewing, peristaltic movements, denaturation by low pH in the stomach, followed by pepsin enzyme digestion. Then there is a change of environment as the chyme enters the duodenum, and further enzymatic processing using enzymes secreted by the pancreas and the intestinal lining. The amino acids are then absorbed through the villi and enter the bloodstream. Now, here are some bullet points or interesting features of digesting proteins. So, because digesting proteins takes longer time than digesting carbohydrates, you may feel fuller for a longer time, and your blood sugar will rise slower. So these might be good things to keep in mind as you plan your diet. Although fats are even better in this regard, but of course they have disadvantages as well. So what happens if you eat a particular protein? Are there differences? Are there health effects that can be related to different types of proteins? And could this have health effects? Well, the answer to that is yes, maybe to some extent. One example is supplementing your diet with collagen. This could help you to get shiny hair, skin, and nails, and strong tendons and bones, and it could even contribute to signs of aging. However, the effectiveness of this may depend on many factors, such as whether you need more protein in your diet at all, your age, and general health. As we have noted, other effects of eating a lot of protein might have positive effects on exercise recovery. It may, in combination with exercise, help you increase muscle mass. And it could also increase the thermic effect of your diet. So the thermic effect of your diet is related to how much energy you actually need just to process your food. So proteins is more costly to digest in terms of the thermic effect and other biomolecules. So that might also be a reason to have a relatively high protein diet. However, if you eat too much undigested protein, might feed microbes in the lower part of your intestine, causing a lot of gas. It might also put a strain on your kidneys as a lot of nitrogen needs to be excreted. So now, finally, we would like to get back to Trogdor. Could we speculate about the metabolism of Trogdor? Obviously, he takes collagen supplements. Look at his shiny, majestic glory here. So collagen obviously works on dragon scales as well as hair and skin. Now this beefy arm here must be a sure sign of gym membership in combination with a high protein diet, which we recall as eating medieval peasants. And then we have his fiery breath. This is pure speculation, but maybe a combination of excess protein leading to a lot of gas production, maybe in combination with the high ammonia production. Trogdor could reroute this to his mouth instead of, excrete it the usual way, and use it for devastating effect. Now, I bet that left your head spinning. So have a break and return to the next installment of this lecture when you're ready.